Okay, hi everyone. Sorry, still not on time even though I pushed it back like way later. And I look really weird today. Trying a new setup. I guess that's a bit better. Maybe it was too bright. Right. So, hi everyone. How is everyone? You good? So, hi Brainless. You alright, bro guy? You alright, Izzy? You alright, Joe? Oh my gosh, I'm really red-faced today. Right. So I've got a few. So now one of them is part of a series about underwater caving and things. Like I quite like the sound of this one, and I'm thinking of doing that, right? And I'm not sure whether to do it like story now or actually upload them individually as videos. Which I'm more leaning towards doing that and trying to put out a bit more content. So yeah. So far it's got like three parts to it. So let's juggle the things a bit. Juggle the things about. Right. You're right, Glober Mum. So first we have Mum, why is Rose walking around? Sometimes I visit my mother at her house. She's not really old. She's only in her 50s, but she has been unable to take care of herself since we lost my sister. It's hard to visit them because I have a family of my own now. I grew up with a beautiful childless couple. I grew up with a beautiful childless couple after my mother fell ill. Now I consider them my parents. However, sometimes I feel the need to spend time with the woman who raised me through the age of 10. She makes me happy to see how clean and tidy she looks in the house. It's the closest she'll ever get to healthy and normal. They shower her every day and dress her carefully in her clothes, but somehow clumps of hair always escape from the bun they put her hair in and form billowing tendrils around her head. She lets me hold her hand, but she never looks into my eyes. Instead, her eyes wander around the room, almost as if she's looking at something. She sometimes smiles and mumbles at the things she's looking at, and sometimes she giggles helplessly. It's hard to watch, but I go to see her because part of me still remembers the woman she was, and I really loved that woman. I remember how it felt to be her child. She adored me because she had a hard time getting pregnant before me. I still remember the early years before my sister was born. My mother spent hours playing with me while my father was at work. We would build Lego houses and pillow fortresses. She let me help her cook. But it all started to go wrong when my sister Rose was born. She had a spinal malformation that left her paralysed from the neck down. My mother's life began to revolve around taking care of Rose. Rose could not sit up by herself. She could only move her neck back and forth. My mother was always worried about choking. This worry was so constant and so all-consuming that it even got to me. I remember sitting next to Rose and watching her small chest rise and fall with each uncertain breath. I was only 7 then. It was gradual at first, but my parents started arguing more and more. And one day, when I was 9, I woke up in another life. My father had packed up everything he owned and left at night. He just disappeared from my life. It was just me, my mother, and my handicapped sister. It was difficult for my mother to find work. I don't think we had much savings. And Rose was a helpless 2-year-old who couldn't even sit up on her own. She couldn't be left alone, and we couldn't afford to take care of her. I remember my mother crying a lot at that time. She slumped over on our worn sofa and cried. I didn't know what I could do to help, so I tried to take care of Rose as much as possible. I would roll her around the apartment in her stroller and have long silly talks about her dolls. Sometimes my mother would sit and watch us dry-eyed and wooden. I knew I shouldn't bother her, no matter how much her blank face scared me. It was a difficult time, but Rose and I were too young to realise how bleak our situation was. We still had our old toys, we still had a roof over our heads. We didn't know anything about bills and the rent. But then, things seemed to improve. My mother finally managed to find a job, and miraculously, it was a job that allowed her to stay home and take care of Rose. There was a grand old hotel in the city where we lived. It had been very popular a few decades ago, but it had lost its popularity. A few decades, It had been very popular a few decades ago, but its popularity had waned over time until it was turned into a sort of living room. Sorry, whoever's written this has sort of translated it into English. So there's a lot of iffy bits where like in a lot of foreign languages, he and she don't translate well. So I'm having to sort certain bits out on the fly. It had been very popular a few decades ago, but its popularity had waned over time until it was turned into a sort of hostel, which quickly fell into disrepair. My mother's new job was to take care of the old, dilapidated building. She was happy to take the job and even more grateful for the free housing that it came with. It's hard to describe the emotion I felt when we moved into the Fairmont Hotel. It was much larger than our crammed 3-room apartment. The hotel was 4 stories high, with each floor extended along long carpeted corridors. The vastness of the hotel was an unfathomable mystery to me. I was in awe of its musty, moth-eaten grandeur. I loved the creamy, peeling wallpaper and the rust-stained carpet. And I loved the dusty old light fixtures that twinkled menacingly whenever a truck passed. I felt like I landed in a fairy tale, like I was the prince of an abandoned castle from Beauty and the Beast. Most of the units were empty, so the third and fourth floors were kept closed, but I could roam freely on the second floor, and I always played there when I got home from school. My favourite pastime was driving Rose through the corridors in a crazy rut. She loved the feeling of moving fast and screaming at the top of her lungs. My mum told us to shut up, but she smiled as she said it. And for the first time in years, there were no wrinkles on her forehead. But the hotel had a strange effect on Rose. She had always been a happy child, despite the many inconveniences brought by her illness. But she became sullen and restless. She was quite fluent now, but when we asked her what was bothering her, she would shut up and cry or mumble incoherent words about an old lady. She also had trouble sleeping at night. We both shared a room, and sometimes she woke me up at night. It was always the same. When I woke up, she was muttering angrily, her head cocked to the side as if looking at something. I learned from experience not to tell her about it, because she would always cry because of the bad lady. She also started getting strange bruises on her legs. It was hard to imagine where she got those bruises from, since we were always with her. When we asked her about it, she said the old lady pinched her. However, we were happier than we had been in a long time, and although Rose was often pale and silent, she was happy when I played with her. But things went bad again. I find it hard to talk about this. I can't remember the exact details of what happened. It comes to mind in a flash, but some of the images are burned into my memory, and I keep seeing her when I close my eyes. Rose and I played our favourite game. I pushed her down the second floor corridor. The second floor hallway curves slightly, then leads to a spiral staircase that opens to the lobby. Rose loved the thrill of me pretending to roll face first against the curved wall at the end of the hall, but of course I pushed her aside at the last second. And we stopped on the landing, and we stopped at the stairs. We did this for about half an hour. I was getting tired of running, but Rose asked for one last go. So I got behind the pram and I started pushing it against the wall. From that moment, everything becomes blurry. I remember feeling exhausted. My arms felt like lead, but all the while my legs were pumping and pumping, and I was running faster and faster. The wall came at us like a clenched white. Okay. The wall came to us like a bone-white fist. I remember imagining us crashing into it. But of course, I would cancel at the last minute. I always did. But something went wrong. Somehow I couldn't. I think No, that doesn't make sense. It seemed like I'd lost control of my limbs. Everything was foggy. The only thing I remember was to hurry up. What? Sorry, this bit's really tricky for this one. But something went wrong. Somehow, I could not stop. I had lost all control of my limbs. Everything was foggy. The only thing I remember was the urge to rush at the wall. I also remember the sound that the wheelchair emitted when it crumpled against the wall. There was a crack of broken plastic, and then Rose hurtled through the air like a rag doll, and she fell down the stairs. When I close my eyes, I can still see her little neck touching the stairs and her body folding over her head. There were screams everywhere, I think. Oh, there are screams everywhere. I think I shouted too. But so was my mother. She sat down at the foot of the spiral staircase with Rose's crumpled body in her arms and screamed and screamed. It took all I had to get down to where my mother lay sobbing over Rose's body. She looked at me, but there was no recognition on her face. It was almost like she couldn't see me through the tears. And then the most amazing thing happened. A cough came from the centre of my mother's arms, and another, and then Rose's stammering voice calling for Mum. But in her grief, my mother was numb to what was happening. Mum, Mum, Rose is fine. I had to shout it several times before she looked at me. What? I think she's fine. I untied my mother's arms, and sure enough, Rose blinked and smiled at us, amazingly, even though her face was smeared with blood. How? But one more smile from Rose, and she forgot everything. She hugged Rose through her tears. I also tried to hug Rose, but my mother wouldn't let her go. I noticed blood flowing from Rose's mouth and nose. Mum, there's blood. It's nothing, she said, rubbing the blood away with her sleeves. Rose's neck twisted oddly to the side. Mum, I think we should take her to the hospital. Don't be ridiculous. She took Rose in her arms and carried her. She cooed like she was a little baby again, and Rose giggled happily. I don't like to think about this period that followed. Part of me thinks I imagined it, but part of me is terrified that it actually happened. Rose was never the same after that day. Something was wrong with her. It is possible that she suffered some sort of internal damage from the fall, but somehow I could never get my mum to take her to the hospital. Her skin started to turn mottled and grey, and she started to smell awful. I had only smelt something like this once before. We had a dead skunk in my school's basement, and the stench filled our classroom with filth before the cleaner removed the carcass. This is the smell of Rose. I don't know if my mother noticed, but I think part of her knew something was wrong. We lived on the second floor next to the few tenants of the hotel, but after Rose fell, she moved us to the fourth floor. It was horrible living on the fourth floor with my mother and Rose. The whole level was dusty and dark. Mum only turned the lights at the end we lived. The rest of the corridor was always in complete darkness. It was like being buried alive. A feeling heightened by the stench clinging to Rose's tiny body. Rose scared me too. Her personality had changed. She hated me. I don't know how I knew that, but I could feel it. Fortunately, we no longer shared a room. Mum couldn't bear to leave her alone at night, so Rose slept with her in a small crib. I don't know how my mother could have ignored that smell. I missed the old Rose. I missed her so much that I even dreamed of her once. I was dozing off when it happened. She sat next to my bed like she never could if she was alive. And she was radiant and happy, but tears welled up in her eyes when she looked at me. And she reached and touched my face. I felt a kind of peace that I hadn't felt in a while. But then she looked around in surprise, as if she heard something. "What is it?" I whispered. "She's here," she said, and then disappeared. I must have woken up at that moment, because even I heard something, the sound of the door slowly closing. And I swear I heard the sound of a baby's feet disappearing into my mother's room. That sound filled me with a sort of horror. I don't know what I imagined, but that's not what I saw when I sneaked a peek into my mother's room. The room was completely dark except for the streetlight that streamed in through the window. My mother sat on the floor and played with Rose. And Rose sat up and laughed. A cloth was tied tightly around her neck, but her head still wobbled as she moved. They hit a mouse together. And then Rose looked up and saw me. She became very still, and a kind of hiss escaped her marbled blue lips. Mother looked up too. "What are you doing out of bed?" she says. "Mum, why is Rose walking around?" "She's cured. Can you not see? She's perfectly fine." I couldn't see my mother's face in the dark room, but I could see Rose's grey, sunken face. She didn't look well. "Mum, can we take her to the doctor? Please." I whimpered and begged, but it didn't help. "Tell that thing to go away," Rose said. "Go," Mum yelled at me. My life was a bit of hell after that. Rose only went out at night. She never left the room. Nobody had seen her. No one knew what she looked like. During the day, I had to go to school and pretend everything was fine at home. I knew Rose was too young to hurt me, but she worried me. Sometimes it felt like she was following me. I would hear that soft footsteps behind me, but if I turned around, no one was there. And one day it finally happened. I was about to run down the stairs when I heard some kind of sobbing behind me. I turned around and found myself face to face with my mother. She carried Rose in her arms. Her face was pale and drawn, and her face was pale, and her lips were drawn in a kind of grimace. "Mum?" "No, I'm not your mother." She nudged me as she spoke. I reached out for her. But all I could reach was Rose's rotting grey body. I felt myself losing balance, and as I fell, Rose fell with me. Mum yelled for Rose, but it was too late. Rose's tiny body cushioned my fall and was crushed in the process. Mum hasn't been the same since. I failed to tell. Mum hasn't been the same since. Okay, what am I going to do with that? The police were called. I don't know, they've not added that. It skips like a whole ass thing. Mum hasn't been the same since. I failed to tell the police that I didn't fall. Mum pushed me. But they took her away and put her in a house. Everyone thought Rose had been dead for weeks. I was forced to go to a psychologist. They found me a new home. However, I tried to visit Mum as much as possible. But I think part of her still hates me for causing Rose's first accident. I think she pinches me sometimes. Although I've never caught her doing it, sometimes I feel intense pain when I sit with her. And she always laughs when it happens and mumbles and coos at something that only she can see. I try not to disturb her, although my arms and thighs are still blue and black with bruises after visiting them. You're right, Tiny Captain Love. Hiya. Yeah. Falling on the demon baby carcass. Swish. So logistically, how's that going to happen? So you're the kid, you turn around, you're there face to face with Mum, right? Mum's holding demon baby. La 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 la. She holding baby pushes you. You go to grab her. You grab the baby as you fall. Maybe if you threw it like as you were falling back. Yes, I know I'm thinking far too much into this. Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm good. Right. Right. I've got another one, and it is like kid related again. I guess it's the vibe we're going for tonight. My sister went missing in 1993. She came back, but she's not herself, and now my parents are in danger. It was April 16th, 1989, when my parents, Carrie Long, and Matthew Stevens welcomed their baby girl into the world. They had named her Dolores, unaware of the meaning of the name, Sorrow. Little Dolly had hazelnut brown hair and big brown eyes. My mother often spoke of how her rosy cheeks, fair skin, and pretty frilly dresses made her look identical to porcelain dolls. Even at the age of 4, people were surprised at how dainty and delicate she was. The way she was described by others, she was perfect. Despite her being an accidental pregnancy, my parents being no older than 15 at the time, she was considered a blessing. I don't begrudge her the love my parents have. I don't begrudge her the love my parents have always had for her. But for once, I wish I could have meant as much to them as she did. I never met the girl. I was born in 2005, long after she went missing. After losing Dolly and the series of miscarriages that follow, my parents had not much love left. I was born more for the sake of it than anything. I never went a day without hearing about Dolly and my other lost siblings too. They attempted to name some of them, but gave up after the 8th. Babies that were never born, yet I could never live up to them. Memorial decor filled our home. Not that it ever felt like a home to me. Hazel would have been a beautiful girl with hair like Doll's. Angel would have had Dolly's kind nature. And what about me? Mallory, Molly. I'm tall and thin, with pale skin and big brown eyes. Am I not the beauty my sister was? But I'm here. I never left. You can just imagine how I felt when Dolly appeared on our doorstep in January, covered in dirt. Her hair remained in pigtails and she wore a pink summer dress. Should she not be a 30-year-old woman by now? She turned 5 on her birthday, but was 4 when she showed up. I stepped out of the house to go to school and saw her sitting on the front yard, as if she never left. I paused for a moment, thinking it was some random girl. I went inside and got my dad, telling him there's an abandoned toddler outside. Mum was showering, unaware I'd just found her long-lost daughter. "Oh my, Dolly, is that you? Come to Daddy, baby girl. I've missed you so much," he sobbed as he squeezed her tight. She didn't react at first, only when he pulled away and looked into her eyes and said gently, "Dolly?" did she respond with an enthusiastic, "Daddy." I was more confused than anything. As I watched all this unfold, how could this child be my missing older sister? How could she just turn up 26 years later without a scratch on her? And without aging a day? I tried to point this out, but no one acknowledged my protest. Needless to say, Mum was just as ecstatic as Dad had been, if not more. Dolores was sweet in the beginning. I'd sit and watch her play and draw. She was a normal, pretty little girl. I wanted to ask what happened, but my parents insist we move past it. They were just grateful to have their Dolly back. I, for one, felt more pushed out than ever. My first real suspicion of Dolly not being Dolly began on the Thursday following her reappearance. I mentioned the stuffed horse she'd always been known to carry around with her. She looked me dead in the eyes, then looked down at my drawing of horses in the field and tore it up, all the while screaming, "I hate horses," over and over, until the paper was practically confetti. She then looked up at me again and said, in her not-so-sweet little voice, "And I hate you." I didn't chase after her when she stomped upstairs to her bedroom. I just sat there, mouth agape, trying to process what had just happened. Up until then, we'd been having quite a nice time scribbling away with her crayons together. Perhaps the horse was a trigger for her. I tried not to take it personally, but the oddities did not stop there. Her once thick and healthy loose curls were falling out in clumps. Her ivory skin was turning greyish-greenish blue. Her adorable brown eyes were blackening. And she was getting unexpectedly thinner. I tried to express my concerns to my parents, but they wouldn't hear it. "Dolly hasn't ever thrown a tantrum. Stop trying to get her into trouble. And don't say such things about your sister. Nothing's wrong with her." The last few months have been strange, to say the least, but nothing major has happened. For the most part, I'd had a nice time hanging out with my sister, and having her around made me feel less jealous than before. I didn't see her as competition anymore. Just my unfortunate older baby sister, Dolores. That was until last Saturday. It was the night before the anniversary of the day she went missing, and I awoke to her standing beside my bed, watching me sleep. Half asleep, I asked, "Dolly, what are you doing?" "They got rid of me. Then they replaced me with you. They have to pay." "What are you talking about?" "It's not your fault, Molly. It was Mummy. She didn't see me get in the car. She left me in the woods, and Daddy helped her. They have to pay." She then walked out and went to sleep. It didn't happen again, and neither of us mentioned it. I began researching her disappearance. The things she said, what did they mean? I thought about how she hadn't aged and how she'd been covered in dirt when I found her. Then I thought about my mother's history of suicide attempts near the time of Dolly's disappearance. Then I thought about her unusually coloured skin, her hair and eyes. I'd researched children going missing and coming back the exact same age. Dolores was one of many. All the children died mysteriously after being found, and a lot of them did some strange things before they passed. Some killed animals, family pets, siblings, family, other children their age, or they committed arson, attacked people, or made strange art. I realised their art, actions, or weird things they said connected to their disappearance. Maggie Price was found in her backyard 13 years after her disappearance, still a little girl, covered in bruises. She cut her dad's hands off while he slept before stabbing him in the throat. Their decaying bodies were found 3 days later. There were all sorts of stories like this. It occurred to me to check Dolly's drawings. Cars, forests, dirt, shovels, Mum and Dad with X's for eyes. I ran to the garage where her toy horse was framed on the wall, then climbed into my dad's car. When I got to the woods closest to my house, I knew where to go. Our old dog Ducky's grave. There it was, an empty hole beside his place of burial. Something had escaped. No, someone. I've been staying at a friend's house since then. I know I can't stop Dolores from completing her unfinished business, or I'll become part of it. I'm starting the grieving process for her and my parents now, to make it easier on myself when they die. And, to be honest, I'm going to miss Dolly the most. That's it. That's that one. I kind of like that one. I've not so much heard of the kids reappearing after going missing. Seems quite interesting to me. Right. There's that one. Okay. So let's do another one. Okay, I've not actually proofread this one, so I'm not too sure of it. Oh wow, this is a very long one. Let's see. Oh shit, I like that one, but I can't read it yet. So there's one I found that is like really fucking good, but the person, like, to be fair, they're really lucky that I actually like looked at their page, not just the story, because they didn't put on their story, but they put specifically on their page, like, don't read this out without my permission, message me first, blah blah blah, right? That's absolutely fine, absolutely no problem, I don't mind doing that. So like got to message them, but they're lucky I looked, because I don't normally look at people's profiles to see that. And also, like, I think as long as it's not copyrighted, they can't do anything about it because it's on Reddit. But I don't want to be a rude ass bitch, and like I'm going to be respectful about what they've asked. But like it's really good, so I'm definitely going to message them to ask if I can read it out. Oh, there's not been an update on that one. I mean, you're right. I am always a rude ass bitch. I'm an absolutely evil, degenerate fucking cunt. What can I say? When death's a bit too busy and the devil is too much. No, when the devil's too busy and death's a bit too much, they call me by name, you see, for my special touch. Got a love bit of Voltaire. To the gentlemen, I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprise. What do you mean that's not an insult? That's totally a fucking insult. How dare you insult me, Brainless? I hate you. I'm going to go cry now. I'm going to go cry and play the vein violin. How dare you? Ah. see. What is the best one of today? Oh, it would be his. Let's see if our good old friend Scary Max has put anything new. Visual stories. Oh, they've still not put an update to that one. Sorry, there's like Scary Max has been like, I've read quite a few of their stuff because like I really like their stories. I do think they're good. So wow, they've written a lot. Ooh, I'm gonna try and pick one of them. Okay. I have pre-read one of these. Well, I wonder what this one is. The Cemetery Bells. Okay, let's see how it goes. We have a tradition in my village that dates back to the times when the living were buried by accident. We attach a string to the hand of each corpse as we lower them into the ground and attach it to a bell. The bells are always silent. My village is a windless place, and we consider it bad luck to ring them ourselves. Even the children don't dare. But once in a decade, on the 19th of January, the bells all begin to ring at dawn. At first they clang all at once, a regular cacophony, but as time goes by, one stops and then another, until silence returns to the cemetery. By lunch, the bells are done, and we emerge to picnic in the grass. Last year my mother died, probably COVID. My brother Nicola would pace around her grave, hoping to hear her bell ring. But of course it never did. One day he began to wonder what truly happens underground on the 19th. What if they were all alive again, made whole? And what if they simply choked to death over the course of hours, ringing their bells in vain? Nicola shared this theory with me and a few friends, but we cautioned him that such talk is dangerous. I wish he'd listened. On the 19th, we draw the shutters and stay inside. It's supposed to be a time of quiet and remembrance. It's also a time of fear. Since I was a child, I've always imagined the dead crawling at the ground 6 feet below, trying to reach us at the surface. We are encouraged not to look outside. This morning, though, I woke before dawn to find Nicola gone, along with our shovel. I was about to run out into the street and go look for him when the sun rose over the distant mountains and the bells began to ring. Except they were louder this time. The clanging was so intense that I shoved cotton in my ears to block the sounds. Despite this, I heard my brother screaming, "Mama, Mama, Mama," over and over again. I wanted so badly to run to him, but I was afraid. I huddled in the corner of my room, a wool blanket pulled tight around me. By noon, the bells were quiet. I opened my door and sprinted to the cemetery. There, I found Nicholas's shovel beside my mother's grave. The earth there was disturbed, like it had been dug out and then put back in place. I called out my brother's name, but there was no answer. But as I was about to give up hope, the bell above my mother's grave gave one weak ring. I looked at the shovel and down at the ground. I looked at the bell, waiting for it to ring again. But it was silent. I was not brave like my brother. I lingered there for a moment, and then I walked away. See, so good. Whoops. Shit, I forgot how to do it all. How do you get to clipboard? Again, I accidentally got rid of what I copy and pasted. No. Windows V. Really? It wasn't turned on. Fuck a duck. Oh well. It's not that much of a bother. Right. I want to read one more. So what does the asterisks mean? Do you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to read another one of Scary Max's because I genuinely like his stories so much. Okay. I stole from the witch with razor fingers. Now I must pray to her every midnight. When I was 17 and reckless, I dated a boy who feared nothing. Together we discovered every vice, and after school we'd split up into after school we'd slip into a haze of smoke and wine coolers and explore each other's bodies until dark. One day he told me about a secret garden where fruit grew even in winter. Eating it gave you a high better than any orgasm. I'm not sure if he knew the garden belonged to a witch, but either way, he didn't tell me, and I followed him blindly over a high brick wall. It was just as he said. Surrounded by the bitter snow stood a small green tree, its branches bowing under the weight of peaches. When I picked one and took a bite, the world blossomed into 1,000 colours. I saw every falling snowflake at once in perfect detail, and I saw how together they formed a swirling pattern, and how that shape too belonged in a greater whole, out, out, out into the spiral of the Milky Way. It soon became our daily ritual. We spent the better part of a month there until we'd picked nearly every piece of fruit. We should have worried, but we were young and stupid. In all that time, it never occurred to me that someone was living in the house that adjoined the garden. The place was weather-beaten and crumbling, barely fit for rats. Of course, I should have known better. Each night, someone carefully collected the discarded peach stones, the cigarette butts and the beer bottles. Someone shoveled the snow when it grew high. It was only as I plucked the final fruit from the tree that I saw her looking out at me from the house's one unbroken window. The witch's skin hung from her bones as if she were long dead, but her eyes were as bright as a child's. When she put her hands to the window glass, I saw her fingers were a foot long each, tapering to points at the ends like tree branches. "We need to run," I said, but the boy was busy staring up into the face of God. "It's so beautiful," he said. At the window, the witch had disappeared. Somewhere in the house, I heard the rapping beat of footsteps down the crumbling stairs. I ran sprinting to the wall. I jumped high as I could and hoisted myself up. Then, looking back, I saw her approach him from behind. I called his name, and our eyes met one last time. He smiled at me dreamily, and then she stuck a long finger into the spot where his neck met his back. It pierced his windpipe and emerged below his chin. Blood gushed from the wound, dyeing his whole front crimson. His body went limp, but the lights were still on in his eyes. Suddenly terrified, he gulped at the air like a fish. The witch held him up to the setting sun, hoisting him as easy as if he were built of paper and cotton. For a moment, the old woman and I met eyes. Then she blew out a white breath, almost whistling. Something stabbed at me, like ice wrapping my heart. Then the witch smiled and took the boy by the leg and dragged him inside. I never saw him again. The police didn't believe in witches, and when they visited the address I gave them, they found an empty lot. I cried and raved and told them to keep looking, but most of the cops just rolled their eyes. One young officer took me aside, though, and handed me a crumpled up piece of paper. "I know you've seen her," he whispered. "These other guys don't get it. Honestly, it's easier for them to just let her take you and pretend it never happened. But if you want to live, you can. It just won't be easy." I looked down at the paper in my hand and considered throwing it in his face. But then I slipped it in my pocket and walked away. At night I could hear scraping at my window, a little louder each night. Sometimes there'd be thumps on the roof, and then the air would freeze around me, so cold that I could see my breath in the moonlight. Other times, the air would fill with the smell of ripe peaches, and I'd feel the sudden urge to open the window and jump out into the darkness. Then one morning I woke to find 5 pinprick holes in the glass, so small they hadn't even created cracks. The winter cold air blew in as I remembered the witch's breath, and I sensed my time was running out. I uncrumpled the paper the cop had given me. It was an address downtown, an infamous block where you had to watch your step to avoid the discarded needles. I put on my heaviest coat and walked there, only to find an empty lot. "Hello?" I called out. There were a few old men sitting against the wall, eating plain slices of wheat bread. 2 ignored me, but the third rose and walked over. From the dirt caked onto his face and the rank odour of his overcoat, I could tell he'd been on the street for longer than I'd been alive. "She blew you a kiss, didn't she?" he asked. "You don't got to answer. I see it on you. Old Tom here knows these things. You ain't got much time left unless you listen to me and listen careful." I didn't respond, but I felt the ice around my heart stabbing softly at me. "Tough curse," said old Tom. "Unbreakable. But it can be lived through, if living's your goal. Is it?" I shrugged, unsure. "Do you want to live or not?" he asked, growing frustrated. "Won't ask again. Ignore me and she'll come for you. You'll wake one day to find us standing over you in your bed, your heart dripping in them long fingers she got." Now I was shaking, because I knew he'd seen her too. "I don't want to die," I said finally. "Tell me what I have to do." "It's easy, and it's hard," said the old man. "All you have to do is say the witch's prayer at midnight. That hard part is you got to do it every day for the rest of your life. Fuck up even one word, miss one midnight by a few seconds, and she'll come for you. Fall asleep at 11:30 and sleep through the appointed time, you'll wake up dead. You get me?" I nodded. "What's the prayer?" He raised his hand and whispered, "We who have eaten the fruit and seen the other side, ask mercy from the mother with the empty womb, for we know that broken hearts can't hide the ice that lies inside our body's tomb." Tom made me say it with him after that once. When I missed a word, he slapped me hard across the face. "You sure you want to live?" he asked. The next time I got the words right, together we said them over and over again until I knew it by heart. "Remember," he said, "every night from now on. Every night. You've made enough mistakes for a lifetime, gal. You don't get another one." That night at 8 I started getting edgy and opened a bottle of my dad's wine, but after half a glass I started to feel sleepy. So I poured it down the sink and made a pot of coffee instead. I missed the boy hard, but he was dead, and I was here, and I wasn't ready to join him. But I couldn't help my mind wandering to the taste of his skin, or the way he'd smile at me with a cigarette hanging out the corner of his mouth. I suddenly realised that I was intensely bored. All of the TV shows that had made me laugh before seemed mind-numbingly insipid now. Finally, I picked up one of my grandfather's old books and started to read. It was some dense volume of Dickens I could barely comprehend, but as I kept chipping away at the meaning of the words, I felt my mind start to loosen and comprehend, like some long frozen creature coming back to life. At midnight, I said the prayer, and for the first time in a while, I felt safe. I went to sleep with the book in hand. As the days went by, everything began to change. I had become used to waking sick and hungover. Now, for the first time since I'd met the boy, I felt okay. I'd wait before my parents and walk through the dark, sleepy neighbourhoods. As weeks passed, the walks became runs. My smoker's cough soon disappeared, and my doughy body firmed up. School went from an impossible chore to something bearable. I pulled my D's up to B's and even A's. My future plans pivoted from Dead by 27 like Kurt and Janice to college and more, pre-law, a family of my own. And then, one day as I was jogging, I saw the house. It was just like I remembered, except this time, smoke was pouring out the chimney. I slowed as I approached. Everything in me screamed to run, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to take another look. I hoisted myself up the top of the red brick wall, and there was the tree. It was spring now, and the fruit was riper and more plentiful than I had ever imagined. It seemed impossible that the branches wouldn't snap under the weight of it. Sitting in the shade of the tree was the witch. She was eating something, chewing slowly, as if enjoying every last bit. At first I thought it was beef jerky, but then I realized the truth. Beside her lay a corpse, its skin leathery and firm, as if it had spent all week in a smoker. As I watched, she'd slice off a thin strip of thigh with her razor fingers and brought it to her lips, smelling it like fine wine before she put it to her lips. Then she noticed me for the first time and smiled. She beckoned to me and then struck the tree, causing an avalanche of fruit to fall on the soft grass around her. When I stood, frozen, she speared the peach on one finger and held it out like a candy apple. When I still remained, she tossed it at me. A perfect arc that I caught with two hands. For a second I stared at the fruit and imagined seeing the world explode into magic just one more time. Then I watched the witch take another bite of the corpse, and my stomach turned. I dropped the fruit and ran home as fast as I could. In college, I met a lot of boys who wanted me, but I knew they'd never understand. I couldn't risk going to a frat party, not even a single beer. If I missed my midnight curfew, I knew the witch would return for me. And so I spent my nights in my dorm, studying and watching the clock. And dutifully, at midnight, I'd recite the prayer. We who have eaten the fruit and seen the other side. As I finished one night, I thought I heard the echo of the final words. Our body's tomb. Sure enough, I peeked out my door to see a young man on his knees in the dorm lounge just finishing the same prayer. Sorry, he said, getting up. I thought everyone was at the midnight movie madness. Not us, I said. We've got midnight plans, don't we? Permanently. He met my eyes, suddenly curious. So, you've seen her? He asked. Back in high school, I said. His name was Nathan, and though I didn't know it yet, he was the man destined to be the father of my child. He had seen the witch too, though his encounter was a little different. He and a group of his friends had stolen a truck. They didn't even notice the fruit in the back until they were back at his ranch. All day they sat in a cornfield munching on stolen peaches and watching clouds turn into angels and whales. Then, as night fell and the fruit ran out, the witch arrived. The guys were so blissed out that they didn't even notice her until she was on top of them, her long nails piercing one's eyes and poking through the back of his skull. She went through the group quickly, killing most of them. While they were half in dreams, only Nathan had survived, jumping in the truck and driving away as fast as he could while his friends screamed for him to come back. All through college, we remained inseparable, running through foothills of campus, studying together, and, of course, saying our midnight prayers. I wasn't as blissfully in love with him as I was the other boy, but he was dependable in a way I'd never know, bringing me my morning coffee and dutifully running flashcards with me when I struggled in my anatomy class. And when I got pregnant senior year, he never pressured me one way or the other. He let me decide. And when I made the choice to keep it, he offered up a ring. It wasn't the way I'd wanted things to be, but I loved him, and I said yes. We held the wedding privately on a beach, just the two of us and an officiant, a local minister who agreed to a reduced fee. Later, we sat in the dark sand watching the stars come out, and Nathan pulled out a bottle of champagne from the cooler in the trunk of his car. Nathan, I said, you know we can't. The prayer's coming up soon. Not to mention the baby. Nathan laughed. I thought about that, he said. One sip won't kill us or the kid. And we can do it right after midnight, so we're not taking any risk. In a way, he had a point. Drinking right after midnight was probably the safest way to go. I didn't want to say no to him, not on our wedding night. Maybe, I said. At midnight we said the prayer together, and he popped the bottle open. As he did, I looked down at the waves and saw her there, watching us, the surf curling around her ankles. Nathan, I said as he drank straight from the bottle, look. The witch walked slowly towards us, dragging her long fingers in the sand, leaving 10 narrow lines in her wake. You can't touch us, he shouted, standing and taking another drink. We said the prayer. We didn't stutter. We got every word. The witch came closer, and then closer still. 20 feet, 10 feet. I felt my icy heart beating like a hummingbird's wings. She was so close now that I could smell her rank breath and see the red-brown stained ring on her mouth. Please, I said, we did it right. We did everything right. And then she walked right past us. There, in the car, was the officiant who had married us just a few hours earlier. He was dead asleep. The witch opened the driver's side door and then lined up the sharp fingers of one hand with his chest. Suddenly, she pushed forward, burying the hand all the way up to her wrist. When she pulled it back, she held his heart, its white crystals gleaming in the moonlight. The man looked dreamily at it, and then he was gone. I screamed and closed my eyes, but Nathan drank and drank and drank as we watched the witch drag the man through the parking lot and back to the ocean. The marriage that had started badly only got worse. The 12:01 drinks got more and more frequent until one day he decided he could get started at 11. After all, he could say the prayer a little buzzed. And then one day he mumbled as he said the final line. Instead of tomb, the word came out more like thumb. I tried to correct him. Maybe if he said it all over again, he'd be okay. Maybe she wouldn't come. But he wouldn't listen. It's fine, he said. I said it fine. And then he went downstairs to drink more while I held my swollen belly and cried. The next morning, he was gone. All that remained was a trail of blood leading from the couch to the front door, which lay open, rocking rusty on its hinges. And that brings us to Emma. She came just a few weeks later, just after midnight. I remember the contraction hitting mid-prayer, the way I struggled to say every word with perfect dictation, and I did. Then Emma was there, barely even crying. I felt her heart beating in her chest, and I knew I hadn't passed the curse to her. I wept at her perfect warmth. As I kissed her for the first time, I looked out of the hospital window and saw the witch there, watching jealously. I remembered hearing once that she coveted the flesh of children most of all. The witch tapped her long, sharp fingers on the glass and smiled hungrily. She did not enter, but she stayed there most of the night, waiting patiently. So many bleary nights would follow, times when I thought I'd never keep my eyes open. We fought off colds and flu, Rosalia and Coop. Sometimes I didn't sleep for 48 hours at a time, but no matter how tired I got, I was always ready at midnight. I refused to let that bitch rip my heart out in front of my daughter, or to leave her an orphan alone with my body in our small apartment. So, as the years passed, one midnight at a time. Emma is 8 now. Emma is bright and sweet and whole. If I had known love like hers when I was younger, I never would have gone wandering. I never would have met the witch. Every day after school, she returns with armfuls of pencil sketches for me. Usually they are of us. A queen and a princess, a mother cat and a kitten. At night, she snuggles up to me in our double bed, tucking her cold feet under my stomach, falling asleep as I say my prayer. And that brings us to last week. It wasn't anything I did. I never backslid once. Not a drink, never a late night partying with friends. But I got sick. Maybe COVID, maybe flu. I could barely walk to the bathroom. I couldn't catch breath. During the worst night, around 10, my body was just giving up. I was so tired. I had to sleep. And so I set an alarm for 11:45 and told Emma that if I slept through it, she needed to wake me. I told her if I couldn't say my prayer at midnight, the witch would come. She nodded and said okay, but I could tell she was scared. And then I fell into a deep, dark sleep. I woke in the morning alive, but alone. I cried out for Emma, but there was no answer. Barely able to catch breath, I ran to the door and threw it open. She wasn't in her room either, or the couch. I imagined the scene as it played out. The witch approaching my body just after midnight and finding the sleeping child beside me. The way she must have reached into Emma's tiny chest with her razor fingers. I fell to the floor sobbing, cursing the witch, cursing myself for even summoning her in the first place. I was ready to go now, and I called for her to come take me to be with my baby. Mom? I looked up to see Emma holding a plate of burnt pancakes. I ran over and hugged her, my lungs burning with the effort. What happened? I asked. Why didn't you wake me up? You seem so tired, she said. So at midnight, I just said the prayer for you. It's not like I haven't heard you say it 1,000,000 times. And I held her and sobbed, not knowing if the curse was broken or just getting started. Oh, that's so cool. And it's a standalone one. There's no set part 2 to know. You're right, Rexhan. Oh, excuse me. Although I do think I will call it on that one. Hang on. Itchy scar. I'm good, thanks, Rexhan. Right, so let's move that over to the other screen. I look so fucking red. I seriously look like I've got sunburn, just accept that. Night, brainless love. Take a nap, hun. You deserve it. You do a lot of work. Yeah, so, yeah, I'm going to call it for the stories now. But tomorrow I am doing the stories. Tomorrow I'm going to do more of the gameplay. And then I'm going to hopefully do video of that like big long story series and upload those. And I'm going to do like one like episode a week. So I'm going to try and do that and see how it goes. So hopefully release that within the next 2 weeks, because obviously if I'm doing it, I don't want to include mistakes that I make, so I'm going to try like editing and shit, like, you know, like a real YouTuber. I know, it's scary, right? Fuck. But yes, so we can look forward to that, and hopefully I'll find other cool stories to do with that. And if anyone happens to like write scary stories or have a one that they would like to hear me read, feel free to message me in comments about it. I'm sorry if I'm not great at like reading them all the time. I'm just really like shit at that kind of thing. But yeah, I just have one caveat, and that's I will not read any stories about Wendigo or skinwalkers, right? Like, that's not something I'm comfortable doing. Like, and the only way I might do it is if you are actually a Native American from the appropriate tribes. Yeah, because like I don't like the fact that like a lot of Native American culture has been like fucking like appropriated by white people wanting to do something scary and then they get it wrong anyway. So that's the one sort of thing I won't read. No offense to anyone that's written it. That's just like my personal like convictions. What about vindictions? That's my personal convictions. Like, everyone has their own like limits on what they deem are and are not okay. But yeah, on that lovely little like on my soapbox moment, I will say good night. So see you tomorrow. Unless gaming is not your thing, then I will see you next week. So have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Have a wonderful sleep. If that's what you're doing. And if you are, then I failed in my attempt for no sleep. Yeah. Have a good one. Bye.